Good evening and welcome back to Ice Creams, and we are going to proceed with part 2 of our interview with Alan Austen. Now, here's a recap for you. The recap is go back and watch part 1. I'm not going to condense this man's life into 20 seconds because you couldn't be bothered to go back and watch the first part. Watch it. Alan, let's pick up where we left off. So, we were talking Empire Strikes Back. You had done the reshoots. Now, you come off for this movie, and from what you said to me last time, it was you kind of got the call, and they were like, hey, we want you on set, be here, and you didn't even know what Empire Strikes Back was. Was that what happened with Flash Gordon next? Was it a call that sort of came in, said, hey, we got to do set we want you to be on?
Yeah, that's the way that it was in those days with central casting, you know. I mean, you got to remember that this was right at the very beginning of my career. So I just wanted to work, you know. I just, you know, if you wasn't working, you weren't, well, I was eating because I was still at home with my parents. But, you know, that's the way that I was making money in those days. And so, you know, you do the usual thing, phone into central castings every day, see if there was anything coming up, and got the call. Be on this film, Flash Gordon. I knew who Flash Gordon was as from a kid, you know, sort of, you know, television and comics, all that sort of thing. So I had an inkling that it was a film about Flash Gordon. So, yeah, again, I didn't know what I'd be doing on the film or anything like that. So I turned up at Shepperton Studios for a fitting. And, you know, so I'm just taking a look at the set. I mean, they virtually completed the Ming's Palace set where I was going to be working from. And that's when I met Sam Jones, who was showing his parents around the set and taking photographs and everything else. He was just in his civvies t-shirt and jeans, the same as I was. And we got chatting away, and he didn't know if I had a major part in the film or if I was a crowd artist or what. So he introduced me to his parents, which is a really lovely thing to do. And this was the first time I met Sam Jones, and I knew who Sam was from a 10 being made by then. I think it had, but I knew him from something. Anyway, it doesn't matter. And then they dressed me as a Mongo man, and and then it was, I think, about another month's worth of shooting on the actual Ming's Palace set. Perhaps not quite as long as a month, I don't know. But yeah, interesting set, colourful set to say the least.
Yeah.
It's when I again met a few more friends. That one or two are still with me, and Derek Lyons. I don't know if you know Derek Lyons. It was the first time I met him, and we're still friends to this day. A few others that I met on that set that I no longer hear from or see, or I think have even passed away.
Wow.
But again, yeah, on that set, my old friend Trevor Butterfield was a Hawkman. My friend Kelly Garfield was also a Hawkman, and my friend Steve Wyman that went on to become a stuntman. We're still in touch to this day, or rather resumed being in touch a few years back.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just, again, it was continuing. It was another new experience, but because I'd had Empire under my belt by this time, it wasn't strange to be on a film set. It was just a different film set. So it was just part of the learning process of those days.
Yeah. Did you interact with Timothy Dalton at all? Because he was Prince Baron on that set, right? If I remember correctly.
He was, yeah. To my memory, and it's the first and only time I've ever met Timothy. And to my memory, we didn't really interact very much. But I remember that he and Brian Blessed were our daily entertainment on set. They really were. I mean, they became like a double act. They got on like a house on fire together, and they used to entertain us on a more or less daily basis, especially Brian. But yeah, they had, I don't know if I should say too much here, Peter Wingard, who sadly passed away a few years ago.
Yes, yes.
This was his return to acting film after his controversial escapades with the tabloid news back
Yes, yes,
prior to that. In the, I don't think he'd worked for several years because of it. Which wouldn't happen today, but in those days. But he was the subject of a lot of ribbing from Brian and Timothy, which could be a little bit embarrassing at times. But it's okay. I've only said that in this interview, so.
Yeah. And that's, and that's kind of, that must have been, because obviously, I mean, we, for especially for this generation that maybe don't recognize the name sort of Peter Wingard, for some of the millennials that maybe watch these interviews. Peter was huge in this with Department S and Jason King and those kind of things back in the 60s and 70s there, right?
He was a massive television star in those days. And Department S, I still love that show. Jason King was the follow-on to that.
Yep.
Where it was all based around, Peter Wingard's character from Department S.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, coming to the end of the swinging 60s into the early 70s. And, he was a hipster. It was, this is how, a man about town should have behaved. My father hated that show. But we used to like it. It was a bit of hokum on a
amazing
Saturday or Sunday evening. I can't remember now.
Amazing. What would you say is your most positive memory from Flash Gordon?
I would say just the building on relationships with people that became lifelong friends. And it was my first encounter with Page 3 girls. I don't know, Page 3, the tabloid press in this country, Page 3 was a fledgling thing. And so these were glamour models. I mean, these women were incredible, and they were glamour models, and the set was littered with them. I think I don't know if the Sun couldn't get a Page 3 girl at that time. I don't know, because they were all on the set of Flash Gordon. But it was fun, and it was a laugh. I got to have a very nice chat with Max von Sydow on set. Only small talk and nothing. Was very wary not to actually try and interview somebody in those days, and I don't think I've ever done that actually with a celebrity or major film. I'll leave that to you guys. You're much better than me. And bearing in mind I wasn't even 21 by this time. It's but we just we're sitting on set, in a break between takes, waiting for the next scene to be set up, and we just struck up a conversation. Really nice man.
And a legend.
A legend, yeah. Which he kind of was even in those days, actually. Was trying to work it out the other day. As obviously doing these interviews, you kind of, it sets your mind thinking back about the past. And he would have only been 50, very early 50s, if that, and had already achieved an incredible amount by that time, So yeah, I was in awe of the man, but I tried to just keep it simple. But yeah, so then these brief things happen, and then you move on, and
It's amazing though. It's you know, and again, because you know, I'm thinking of you at that age, and I'm applying it to myself when I was that age, and my sensibilities. This just must have been for you coming into the industry, like literally coming in and coming into these crazy big productions like that. This just must have been mind blowing at that age. Like it just really must have been.
To a certain extent, yes, it was. But I think that I was quite an overconfident person back in those days, given how young I was. And sometimes I think, how did I get away with it? You know, but I just took to it like a duck to water, and you know, I didn't have an ego, but I think I was quite confident. But yeah, this was just you get used to it quickly. You know, if you want to survive, you have to get used to it quickly. You know, watch your p's and q's, as my father used to say. You know, it's just you know you know when to speak and when not to speak, and use your ears more than your mouth. You know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, sort of. At that time, 1979, after having spending so much time on Empire, which really took up all of my time. I did, you know, in a couple of breaks during the months of filming on that, I got to do my first television appearance, which was a TV show called The Professionals.
I remember The Professionals. I love The Professionals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember we were watching my episode. I mean, it was shown on Saturday evenings, and you know, I was out every Saturday night. It was really strange if I was at home on a Saturday night back in those days. And so I'm all dressed up, waiting to go out, and I thought, right, we'll watch this episode. And my mother had just given up smoking. Was sort of running around. I need a cigarette. I need a cigarette. I've just seen my son on TV, which was something she never expected to do in her life. So yeah, and then that, you know, it was back to Empire, and straight after Empire, I started to work on Flash Gordon, and then straight after Flash Gordon, I did a few films, and I can't remember which order they came in. I know that I worked for a couple of weeks on Superman 2. And then I did some work on The Elephant Man.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
David Lynch. Yeah.
David Lynch. Yeah. And that was an experience looking back. I think by this time I was quite blasé to the whole thing. And, you know, I'd go on to set thinking, well, I'm a background artist, crowd artist. They're, you know, they're not really going to ask me to do much. And I think I started to. I think at that time was getting the feeling that my big moment was Empire, and then it's just workaday stuff. You know, go in there, yeah, you know, walk past the camera. Oh, you know, just being that group over there, react to what was going on, which was, you know, just more or less the same as what was happening with everything that I did at that period. And by this time we'd entered 1980. I turned 21, and I think I had a feel for the business by that time.
Yeah.
And I had the feeling that I could handle just about anything that was thrown at me. I don't want to sound egotistical or big-headed, but, you know, you learn the ropes.
Yeah.
And, you know, I was learning the ropes and felt confident. Then as we went into 1980, I don't really remember too much about that period. It's so long ago. I often wished I'd kept a diary, to be honest. I think I must have worked on a couple of things during that period because I wasn't broke by any stretch of the imagination at that period, at that point. Then I got the call to go to a casting in Covent Garden. which was still being newly refurbished at that time. Gone from being the flower market to a tourist attraction, and scaffolding was still up everywhere, etc., etc. By this time, we were going into early summer of 1980. So again, I didn't know much about this casting. The central casting's always so abrupt. Go along there. Your call time is whatever it was. I think it was the afternoon, middle of the afternoon, which was a nice time. It meant that I got to lay in. It's called Raiders of the Lost Ark.
I gotta stop you there for a second, because I want to ask you a very specific question. You said, when you got the call for Empire Strikes Back, you were like, I don't even know what this is, right? You said your dad thought it was probably a war film, like the Nazis or something like that. What? Because we're talking like one of the movies, like I watched it again at the weekend. Just gets better. It's like it ages like wine. What was your first thought when you heard Raiders of the Lost Ark? What did you think?
God knows what that is.
Right.
Didn't have a clue. I didn't have a clue. There were no. This was the very early stages of pre-production, and nothing was being released to the press or what have you. Not as far as I can remember. Probably there might have been something in what was that film magazine of those days?
Starburst?
No. What was it called? Film International.
Okay.
Yeah. And which I didn't really. I'd pick up a copy now and again, but anyway. So I've gone along to this casting. And it was unusual to have a casting in those days, actually, for background artists. It was an unusual thing. So I thought, well, this must be something fairly special. Anyway, I got there and bumped into Derek Lyons. He was going to the same casting. We knew nothing about what it was. And so we walked in, and Roy Button, who was a second assistant director on Empire, just approached the two of us, and me in particular, not to play Derek down too much, but I'd worked with Roy for months on Empire. And his words to me were, Alan, thanks for turning up. I'm not going to ask you to do anything. We'll get a couple of Polaroids, that's it. If you want the job, it's yours. We're filming at Elstree again. It's Harrison's got the lead part. Chap called Steven Spielberg is directing. Do you want to come and play? So I said, well, yeah, of course I do, Roy. So that was it. So I just waited on central castings for the details, the call times, etc. He said we're a few weeks away yet, but we've got you. And he said you're in. So we'll just take it from there. And so I just carried on with normal life, and still phoning into castings. I still had to work, and castings put me on to I think it was like a TV movie or something like that, or a very short television series, a police drama production, and I was doing night calls on that as a police officer, young police officer, not doing anything at all, really, just running around and being told what to do. But there were night calls in North London, and it's while I was working on that I got the call from casting to say, look, we're taking you off of this one because we need you at Elstree.
Okay.
On Thursday morning, whatever it was, to start on Raiders of the Lost Ark. So I got to Elstree, again, silly o'clock in the morning. parked up, came straight off the night call, which luckily was only about half an hour drive from the set in North London to Elstree Studios.
Mm-hmm.
So I probably got about, I don't know, 30 minutes sleep in the car before going in, and I was really tired after these night shoots. And so I've got on to set, bumped into Harrison. I wondered if he'd remember me, but it wasn't. It was only the year earlier, not even a year had passed. Probably about 9 months since we'd last seen each other. And so they dressed me up as a German soldier, and it's still early in the morning. And by this time, I'd got the hang of being on a movie set, and I realised, I thought that they're not even going to get to me with the other boys until, after lunch. So I went off and found a quiet corner and bedded down. That was it. I still needed all that sleep to catch up on.
Yeah,
and I was
right.
really tired. So I bedded down and was just literally dozing off when Roy Button came over to me and shook me back into the land of the living. And I said, what's up, Roy? What's up? And when I think about talking about Roy Button now, just to sort of, as an aside, just to put it in,
Yep.
I think the head of Warner Studios, England now, UK.
Wow, really, eh? Okay.
Yeah, I heard. It's either him or Steve Lanning. One of them. I mean, I know they've both got top jobs as producers. Yep. And I can't remember which one is now the head of Warner Brothers UK. But I know they've both done it extremely well. Steve Lanning was, again, an assistant director on Empire. Anyway, I've digressed. We'll come back to the present in 1980. So he said, yeah, come on, pull yourself together. He said, Steven Spielberg wants to meet you. And I've gone, right, come on. It's too early in the morning for jokes. Come on.
Okay.
There,
Yeah.
And he said, no, I'm serious. Come on, get yourself together. He wants to meet you now. And I'm like, what? Why? How? And he said, look, Stephen needs to set up some shots with one of you guys. And Harrison, myself, and Spielberg were just chatting about it 5 minutes ago. And Harrison actually said, hey, Roy, I saw Alan earlier.
Wow.
He said, I think he'll be good. So basically, he recommended me to Spielberg, and Roy backed him up on that. And so we went over to where Stephen was, who was like, behind the camera and messing about with this, that, and the other. We were introduced. Harrison had gone off to his dressing room by that time, I should imagine, to get a few hours sleep as well, because you get a feeling for when they're going to need you and when they're not.
For sure.
And so I was introduced to Spielberg, and luckily for me, Steven Spielberg wasn't the Steven Spielberg that he is today. I mean, certainly he was well known in the industry. We had Jaws behind him, Duel behind him, a couple of other things behind him.
Close Encounters.
Yeah. Behind him. And so I knew that the guy was big. Obviously I did, but he's, that this was before he became the legend that he is today.
Right.
Which made it easier, I've got to say. You're 21 years of age and you're meeting a legend like that. I mean, as I say, it was easier because he wasn't the legend then. She is now. I mean, if I was 21 today and was cast in a film with Steven Spielberg, I'm not sure how I would react to that. At my age now, it wouldn't be a problem at all. But anyway, I'm digressing again. So Stephen talked me through what he wanted me to do, and he then, very kindly and graciously actually, took me along to the wall where he had the storyboard set up. So, series of cartoons,
Mhm.
blow by blow of what was actually happening. And he took me through those, which was actually, as I remember, it was really going over the top of my head. Um, but, you know, I worked in front of the camera with Stephen for a week. And by that time, I'd become familiar with that storyboard. And Stephen was very, very good. You know, we just had small talk. You know, he was intent on what he was doing. So, you know, it was a question of, using my logic, was speak when you're spoken to. This is a busy man, you know.
Yeah.
And the set was still being built. This was in the caverns when we opened the Ark up.
Right. Okay. The climax. Okay.
Yeah. So there was still lots of hammering and banging about going on, you know, sawing of wood and stuff like that. They were still building the set. So yeah, basically, you know, Stephen just took me through what was going to happen. This was basically for the opening of the Ark, when we were all peering in. Next thing you know, we're being obliterated into nothingness. And so, you know, he'd be like, okay, Al, you're being blasted by 1,000, you know, 1,000,000 volts of electricity. Show me what you're going to do. Show me what you're going to do. So, you know, it was a question of, you know, just follow his direction and hopefully give him what he wanted. I mean, it'd be, you know, yeah, no, don't do it like that. Don't do it like that. Try it like this. Try it like this. Okay, show me again. Show me again. Yeah, that's what I want. That's what I want. You know, and it was a big learning curve for me, massive learning curve. And that was a good film to work on. Extremely tiring, but very, very good, and quite strange and eerie too, actually, because that was quite a creepy set.
Yeah. Big time. Big time.
Yeah.
It's funny actually, because for someone that like myself, that is such a, you know, I'm such a horror fan. That's one of the most intense scenes of horror in a movie, and it's in a blockbuster sort of family movie. But that's crazy when the faces are melting and everything and stuff. Did you have any prosthetics done on you during that, or?
No. Basically, it's the main cast who had their faces melt. You know, our soldiers, the ones that were featured for being blasted, we just had to imagine, you know. And Stephen would come amongst us, you know, before he'd set up for a take, and, you know, before he'd go back behind the camera, which is incredible. I mean, he shot a lot of that picture himself. That he would come amongst us and, you know, and just coach us through what we were going to do, and then go back offset and we'd do a take. But he had described to us that, you know, that all the lightning, the bolts of electricity, everything else was going to be CGI'd. And of course, you know, he described to us, you know, imagine all these, you know, horrific, angelic or demonic beings coming out of the Ark, you know, and we've got to react to nothing, basically, just use our own imaginations, which he actually did coach us through very, very well. I mean, the man is a genius.
Yeah.
He really is. And so yeah, that was it. Job done. But I've got to tell you something which I think your viewers might enjoy.
Please.
Harrison and Karen Allen are, you know, tied to a stake offset, off camera. I mean, they filmed those separately, but they were on set, but kind of offset. And Harrison was while we were all being blasted, Harrison's doing his lines, you know, don't look at it, don't look at it, don't look away from it, don't look at it. It's going through all this take after take after take, just voice, just voice. And after saying this for upteen times, don't look at it, look away, look away. Oh, go to hell and take a look at it if you want. Or words to that effect. Oh, go to hell and take a look at it.
Oh my God, that would have completely changed the plot. The end of the film. Suddenly Marion's like, the plastic.
Yeah.
God, that's amazing. So you say that was the end of it. So there was no reshoots or anything. You didn't come back. You moved on to Octopussy, right? James Bond was, or no, it was American Werewolf in London, right?
Well, this is where I get confused with the times and dates. You know, like I say, I mean, I have to look them up, and because I often struggle to remember which year I did this one, which year I did that one. I have to Google it and just check it out. But one thing about Raiders, and this is kind of blowing my own trumpet, with all the small talk with Stephen, it was, you know, kid, are you thinking about taking up acting? And I said, yeah, I am. I said, but, you know, in this country, I have to get British Actors Equity Association union membership. And he said, oh, yeah, I know that. So, in America, it's SAG, you know, blah, blah, blah. So he said, well, you know, what are you gonna do to do that? And I said, well, I'm just learning and gaining ideas and thinking about what I can do. I said, but yeah, if I can get British Equity, I said, then I'll attempt to become an actor. You know, I was doing the odd drama lesson, that sort of thing at the time as well. And so he encouraged me, to be honest. He said, I think you should try it. He said, I think you can do this job. Wow. So, you know, which was massive encouragement. And so this leaves us in the sort of summer of 1980, when I thought, yeah, I've really got to start making the effort. Which I did. And so we progressed on through 80. And, you know, I know that I worked on several productions, but they all became a melee.
Yeah.
You know, it was just, you know, working. It's a way of making a living, you know, and a hard living as well, because, you know, you'd get lots of time off in between where you weren't being paid. And so you really had to be careful with money. And, but I did, you know, after that, I did a whole melee of different films. American Werewolf in London was one of them. I think that might have been the back end of 1980, could have been early 81. I can't remember now. But again, a series of night shoots in Piccadilly Circus.
Oh, so you were in the climax where the creature bursts out of like the movie theater and starts like the rampage?
Yep.
Oh,
right
wow.
there. Wow. Right there. And you know, we wouldn't even start filming until the early hours of the morning, or certainly gone midnight, because Piccadilly Circus, I mean, can you imagine?
Yeah.
I mean, you know, they did, or the police shut down quite a lot of it, whichever deal they made with the film, you know, the film company. And our kind of, for us, our base was the McDonald's across the road. I think it's still there, isn't it? McDonald's in Piccadilly Circus. I haven't been there for years. And we lived on McDonald's. And so, yeah, I was playing one of the London bobbies, and we're sort of outside of the cinema when we know there's pandemonium going on inside, but we don't know what.
Yeah. And
so then the detective, and I can't remember the actor's name, played him in the film now, it turns up, and you know, he goes into the cinema, and the next thing we see is this head come flying out.
Right, yeah.
And bounce off the bonnet of the car. Now, John Landis didn't tell us that was going to happen.
Oh, right, okay.
The shock and the horror, we could not believe what we were seeing. That was the last thing we expected, you know. Yeah, literally. And I tell you what, for the first take, whoever threw that dummy head out hit that bonnet. He must have been a ball player or something, because that head came flying out with all the fake blood flying out of it.
Oh my
Hit
God.
the bonnet and bounced off. And we were like, well, I won't swear, but we were just, can you imagine?
No, please. Yeah. Like, what was
Yeah.
your feeling when you seen that? Because that must have been, yeah, go for it.
Well, it was like, fuck me. What just happened?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and I wasn't used to being around prosthetics or,
Right.
at all. And I remember being really shocked. And we were like, then of course we realized it's a dummy head on the floor and everything else. They're not really going to kill a man, to make a movie. Um, and so then we'd set up again for take two. But as Landis said to us all, said, I want to just keep the same level going, the same level of energy and shock.
Yeah.
Keep that going, because that was brilliant. And we're probably not going to get that again, but please try, So we did another couple of takes on it, but it was done. I mean, really, I think they used the first take for the film. And then it was a question, we were there to keep the crowds back, or, the background artists that were dressed as civilians there.
Yeah.
And we they had to surge forward while we were trying to hold them back, etc. And that was it. But that was about a week of night shoots on that, and that's all I did on that picture, really. But again, another great experience. Then after that, I think I moved on to a film. Well, I don't know. I do get confused with times and dates. I've never made a list in order.
Yeah.
And
No,
maybe
for sure.
I should do. I mean, I could have done that during lockdown, really. That's something I did think about doing, and I didn't get around to it. And I've had all the time in the world to do it, and I just haven't done it. But maybe I will do. I then moved on to a film called Return of the Soldier, which was a favourite to work on, actually. It's a little-known film.
Okay.
It's been very much forgotten about. Big British cast. It starred Alan Bates.
Okay.
He was the soldier that was returning, shell shot with PTSD and memory loss. Glenda Jackson,
Okay.
Anne Margaret, Julie Christie.
Wow, this is quite the cast.
This is a cast beyond belief.
Yeah.
I've seen the film. I went to see it at the cinema, at Special Housing, going to see that because I had a couple of good scenes on it, which I'll tell you about in a second. But and I've only seen it once on television, which I just find amazing because I mean, I know the film is 40 years old now, but it's a bloody good story. So yeah, I played one of Alan Bates's platoon, and we did some trench warfare scenes in Rickmansworth Quarry in deep snow. I mean, it really snowed that year. So Wizard Wheeze dragged us all off to Rickmansworth Quarry, and Alan Bates wasn't in that particular battle scene. But, myself and a couple of other, pals that have become good buddies by this time were. And, it's like midnight in the snow, absolutely freezing cold. I cannot tell you how cold it was. Mm-hmm. I think I almost got hypothermia. And I know about hypothermia because I had that in a television production I was working on a few years back. So when I look back on it, I think I was going into hypothermia. And we had to come out of our trench and get obliterated. And Anne Margaret, this was supposed to be a dream sequence that Anne Margaret was having. And can you imagine, in the middle of this freezing cold and this snow and everything else? And they'd really made it look horrific. I mean, there was barbed wire, and they had plastic skeletons hanging from the wire, half their uniforms off and the rest of it, where it's no man's land.
Yeah.
And it was a really horrific scene. We all said if we'd have been in that for real, I mean, remember, we're in our early 20s. We all said if we'd have been in that for real, the First World War, we would have all deserted, or we would have just shot the officers and walked home. You know, we wouldn't have put up with it. But then again, that was bravado of us at that time. That the reality is that we probably would have just got on with it and been killed in the first couple of days in any case. So whatever.
But it's understandable what you're saying, because again, I'm trying to, you know, as you know, I'm trying to translate this as well to like I say, the younger audience, the millennials and stuff. World War One, good God, I mean, it really was like the horrors that those poor men must have seen. You know, I can understand what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, it really was. It really, for us, I mean, I think we did 2 or 3 nights in that quarry, and you know, we'd had enough. And every time we went back, we were adding more things.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, the friend of mine actually put on the biggest grey sweatshirt hoodie you've ever seen in your life, and he kept the hood up. And they said, no, it looks like a balaclava under there. Put his helmet on top of it. And they said, yeah, I can get away with that. We were doing anything to keep warm.
Yeah,
you know, anything. I mean, they issued us with thermal underwear, but that just wasn't working. But this is the craziest thing. I mean, Anne Margaret, one of the biggest movie stars of her day. I mean, she made films with Elvis Presley, for God's sake. I mean, and Magic with Anthony Hopkins and so many other big films.
Yeah.
And she was a star. She was Hollywood come to England.
Mm-hmm.
And we're sort of, you know, laying in the snow with fake blood and everything else. And Margaret is just in a nightdress, just stepping over our bodies in that horrific cold. And, you know, she'd be saying things like, are you guys okay? Are you guys okay? We're like, and don't know how you're standing it. And as soon as, you know, we got it, they stuck a big thermal coat on her and everything else. But, you know, I know now, you know, from experience of working in the cold, that she was a very brave lady to do that, you know, and not too many takes of it as well, but one take to do that, you know, you only want to do one take of that. I mean, that poor woman was, you know, I've never seen goosebumps so big in my entire life. So then we continued with the film, and my character, I didn't have a scripted name, but you know, with continuity, they then had us, or those of us, my character was supposed to have survived, and so we did some filming in an old Victorian hospital in East London. And my character had to, you know, bandage around the head and everything else, had to wander the wards, shell shot. And, you know, for a few takes, I've wandered onto a ward where there were all these young men with arms and legs missing.
Okay.
And so before we set up to take, I had some time to chat to them all. They drafted them in as background, and they're all, you know, in the ward, laying in the hospital beds.
Yeah.
And I got talking to them, and they would have been about the same age as me. And I said, well, you know, what happened to you? What happened? Every single one of them, motorcycle accidents.
Really, eh?
Every single one of them lost limbs in motorcycle accidents. And I'd been in a motorcycle accident myself when I was 17. I came off the back of a motorbike. My friend was drunk and driving recklessly. We hit a country lane and he lost control, and I was flung from the back of the motorcycle onto the other side of the road. Thank God I had a crash helmet on. And I came out of it pretty unscathed. My friend, who was driving the bloody thing, spent 2 weeks in hospital. It was touch and go. And I tell you what, after that day, well, not just my own accident, but, you know, just talking to these young guys, That was it. You will never, ever get me onto a motorcycle. Never, ever in a million years, especially on the back of one. Never, never. And luckily, I was never asked to learn to ride one for a part, a job. I probably would have said no.
Yeah.
They're deaf. That's my rant about motorcycles anyway. But yeah, I've never forgotten that. Really impressed upon me. And yeah, my son, when he was small, loved motorbikes. And, you know, he had toy motorbikes, the whole lot. But I said to him, Tom, never, ever think about riding a motorcycle. That they should be banned from the roads. They're okay for, you know, racetracks. And look how many, you know, professional motorcyclists or racers have been killed or injured horrifically. Anyway, I've digressed, but that's my little rant about motorcycles. But after that picture, I did a whole melee of, well, it's a whole melee, I keep using that expression, but I know I did a few more films. And by this time, we were entering 1982, and I got the call for Return of the Jedi.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, which I rejected.
Really?
Yeah, they said, you know, come back and be a stormtrooper again on Return of the, or it's called Revenge of the Jedi.
Right, that's right. Yeah. Okay.
And you know, I was doing something to get my equity card. I was doing bits and pieces of theatre and other stuff that would you know, equity was saying, all you got to do is get 2 or 3 contracts, and well, 3 contracts, and you'll be in. And so I was working on those, and Jedi would have massively interrupted that. And this, you know, they said to me, well, you know, there's about a week's work on it. I could have done other stuff on the film if I'd have started work on it. I don't know. 2 or 3 of my friends did, and you know, they played creatures and stuff like that. But no, initially I had to make a snap decision. Gotcha. And that decision was yes or no. Yeah. And you know, what I was involved in was too important to me to say yes. I also turned down another film at that time as well called Lords of Discipline, which a couple of friends of mine worked on. And my God, the stories, Derek Lyons worked on it, the stories he has to tell about that film, but he got about 2 months work out of it and earned as much as the main cast. And he's got some really fun stories. Again, I said no to that. But by that same year, by September of that year, I got my equity card, and that was it. And that was something that I was immensely proud of, and knew that it was going to open up so many doors for me. So then it was a question of focusing on finding myself an acting agent. I was still doing bits and pieces for central castings, but I had to get an acting agent, which I did. And then it was a question of auditioning for everything, not just, oh, you're booked tomorrow. It was a question of, oh yeah, we've got this thing coming for the BBC or Thames Television or whatever, you know, and going to audition or cast for everything, which was a job of work, I can tell you. But that's the life of a young actor. Fortunately for me, it worked. Okay. And yeah, fortunately for me, I worked. I'd still do on the quiet, still do the odd thing for central casting, you know, because I needed to earn money. But no, by this time I was working in television, which is a different story. But I remember that 1985 came around, and I did my last film as a background artist, and that was a film called Absolute Beginners.
David Bowie, right?
David Bowie, yeah. That's probably the main reason why I accepted it. I'd never met him. I was a huge fan of his. He's a South London boy. In fact, we grew up just a few miles down the road from each other. Mm-hmm. And I'd also been at this time doing some teaching some drama tuition, teaching young teenagers the basics of acting at the Beckenham Theatre Centre, which David Bowie established in 1969. He was living in Beckenham. Again, I was only living down the road in Orpington, in that area, which is they're practically next door to each other. So, I just knew I had to get onto that film. A couple of friends of mine were working on it as well. Name drop here if I can.
Go for it.
Well, there was a guy called Johnny Shannon that played Rackman in the film Scandal. Now, I knew him through, never worked with him, but I knew him through various acquaintances. I knew he was working on the picture and I wanted to work with him. Bruce Payne was a good acquaintance of mine. Bruce Payne had one of the lead parts in the film. It looked like it was going to be fun. It was the summer of 1985. They were saying, well, you probably get a month's work out of this, which would have meant a decent wedge of dosh in those days. And so I went along there, and I've got to say it's the happiest film I've ever worked on. I did days and nights on that picture based at Shepperton. And I just had a great, great time. But my agent at the time, when I told her that I was going to go off and do this film, she went mad. Well, Alan, you can't. You're an actor now. You've had leading roles in television. What, you can't go back? What background? Are you mad? Are you mad? I told her my reasons. And also Julian Temple was the director who I'd met. So she said, look, okay, all right, I think your reasons are justified. She said, but if anyone else had said this to me, that they were going to, go off for a month and do a supporting artist work, I would have dropped them off my books. I'd have said, no, don't bother coming back. She said, but I'll benefit of the doubt time. So, and I said to her, she said, but you've got to promise me this is the last one. After this, you finish with Central Castings, the Film Arts Association, everything else. Yeah, okay, agreed. Shook hands on it. So I did meet David Bowie, and we had a great chat about Beckenham Theatre Centre, Beckenham, Bromley, the whole area. He was living in Switzerland by this time, and we smoked a cigarette together, and then we all went off and had lunch. A big long table was set up for us all to have lunch, and I was sitting kind of out of earshot. But I remember that David Bowie was sat next to Lionel Blair, who Lionel Blair was doing the choreography for the film. Okay. Lionel Blair was a national institution.
Oh, huge!
He's still alive now. Yeah, massive. I remember watching Lionel dancing on TV in the '60s. Watched Saturday Night at the Palladium or whatever show. And so they sat next to each other, and they're deep in conversation. And I said to the person I was sat next to at lunch, and I said, I wonder what on earth those two could be talking about, and what on earth those two could have in common to a certain extent. Years later, I've since found out that David Bowie's early days, and in fact, they did have a fair amount in common. But I never did get to the bottom of what the conversation was about until 2, maybe 3 years later.
Okay.
When I'm home on a Saturday night, watching Saturday night TV with my wife of the time, and we're watching a chat show, and Lionel Blair's come on to the chat show, and the interview, I think it was Michael Aspel, said to him, well, you made a film with David Bowie a couple of years ago. He said, but how was that for you? Oh, it was splendid, it was great, he's a lovely guy, blah, blah, blah. And Lionel said, David did shock me and take me by surprise. We were having this conversation over lunch. They'd set up this big long table, and the whole cast were sat at the table having lunch, and I was sat next to Bowie. And I said to him, well, you know, David, it's a strange thing that we've never met before. And David said to me, yes, we have, Lionel. When was that? I auditioned for you for a West End production in 1967, and you turned me down.
Oh.
And Lionel Blair's like shock, aghast, horror, you know, that he turned this phenomenon down.
Jesus, yeah.
You know,
it's crazy.
and so I said to David, "Oh, David, I'm ever so sorry. Well, I must have been a fool." And he said that, you know, I'm surprised you remember it. And David said to him, Lionel, one never forgets one's rejections.
Yeah, right. That's, yeah.
But you know, they got on very well with each other. But you know,
Interesting.
Yeah. So that was the conversation, and I was like to my wife, "My God, that's my conundrum answered. I wonder what those two were talking about." And so that was the conversation they were having. You know, and I'm like, you know, I'm glad we stayed home tonight and watched TV.
Yeah, that's almost, that's like Fate, right? Like, it's crazy. It's really weird.
Yeah.
So you come out of Absolute Beginners, and you know you're doing this work, but I gotta ask you, you know, Alan, there comes a point where you decide to step away from acting. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I'm quite happy to talk about that. Yeah, I mean, after Absolute Beginners, I was steadily working in television and TV commercials, which was one of my mainstays. You know, I paid a mortgage on television commercials. Let me put it that way. And corporate films, video, you know, films for British Airways, you know, Peugeot cars, loads of others. And this was all workaday stuff that kept body and soul together, you know. Yeah. And I carried on for years like that. Then we had a recession in the early 1990s.
Right.
The actor strike was the worst part of it, in not only in the UK, but in the States as well. And the phone didn't ring for 6 months, you know. My agent even stopped going into her office. You know, she would, this was a different agent from the other one, by the way, by this time. Work from home, you know, everyone was pulling their hair out. And so I started a contract cleaning business with my younger brother. Mm-hmm. And, you know, because he was doing the odd acting job as well himself, you know, but he was, you know, very happy to be a supporting artist, whereas, you know, I was doing parts only, which made life difficult. It did. But try and cut a long story short again, because this is a long story. So we set this business up during that recession, and within a year we were a going concern. So we had that year of doing that. I didn't act at all in that period. We got the business going, and then the phone started to ring again. So I was juggling. I often used to wear two hats. You know, I'm running a contract cleaning business on the one hand with, you know, myself and my brother were equal partners. So we both put the time in, which made it easier for me to go off for castings, auditions and stuff like that. Anyway, the work started to come in again. But I now, I'd realised something, where the life of an actor, even if you become famous, it's so precarious. And I could tell you some stories about some famous people that really hit hard times, you know, really hit hard times, because that's all they were doing. And Johnny Shannon had taught me a lesson when we were working on Absolute Beginning, well, but around about that time. Even though he was a good working actor, I mean, sadly, he passed away several years ago, he owned his own painting and decorating business. And he came on the set of Absolute, and he was, you know, sweating and everything else. Oh, I've just come from the job. I mean, he had guys working for him, you know, And it was a hot day as well. I've just come from a job that the guys were having, sort the guys out on the job, and I've had to rush across London to get here and everything else. And that was, but it kept him so that he wouldn't starve. Let's face it, working class actors, we don't have private incomes. I don't care about the Cumberbatches and all the rest of them of today, who went to public school and have come from money and everything. I don't give a toss about their lives or how they make a living or get by. All I know is they don't know hardship the way that working class actors do or have done.
Right.
So I carried on like that with juggling all the balls in the air, being a contractor on the one hand and being a jobbing actor on the other hand. But I'd realised by this time that I was never going to be the star. The penny does drop eventually. That, I was in my 30s by this time, and it's like, my agent asked me if she said she was going to try and put me up for Bond. And I said, don't be daft. I said, there's only one person who's going to get the next Bond, and that's Pierce Brosnan. Everybody else is out of the picture. So we'll go along and meet them. So I went along to this meeting or this interview. It wasn't even a screen test, it was an interview. And I'm sat in this room with a dozen other actors, all about my age, all with dark hair, all about the same height, all wearing, nice suits and ties. And I sat there and thought, this is just a time wasting it, I mean, you never know with these things, they could remember you for something else. But no, they're focused on one purpose only. We've got to find James Bond. Yeah. They'd already found James Bond.
Right.
This was just a tick boxing exercise.
Yeah.
And at that point, I thought, do you know what? I'm never going to be the big star, but I am a jobbing actor. I do get work, and I get some nice work.
Yeah.
And some of it I don't even have to audition for anymore. Some of it, it's just comes over the phone.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, they want you for this thing. It's next week. Can you be around for it? Blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And, TV commercials I always did well with. And I thought, well, I'll just carry on like this until, I had a family by this time. I had a very nice house. I had my business. And I thought, well, do you know what? I'm quite content with life. And then again, to try and condense this story down, to move on, you asked me about why I walked away from acting. Well, I got divorced. I had a new partner. We went off to live in Spain for a while, and I had someone running my business back here who fleeced me for quite a lot of money. Someone that I trusted, but not as much as I should have. Well, there you go. You live and learn in this life.
Live and learn, right? Yeah.
So for 3 years, I was to and from England and Spain. We had an apartment out there, and then eventually that relationship broke up, and I came back to England, and I was having to sort my life out. Felt like starting again from scratch, and started with yet another agent that sent me on a couple of auditions, and I buggered them up. Simple as that. I buggered that, despite workaday stuff that I should have got. They should have been like falling off a log to me. And, as I came out of them, I thought, oh, I've messed that one up. I've messed that one up. And it reminded me of when I was at a casting with a fine actor called Tony Slattery. I don't know if you remember him.
Yeah, I know Tony Slattery.
Yeah, he's making a comeback now. But I remember that, I won't talk too much about his mental health problems. That's not for me to talk about. It's for him to talk about.
Understood.
And he was having a bit of a meltdown in the loo, in the male toilets after the cast. We didn't audition together. We auditioned separately for different parts. But, he was having a meltdown in there. And, when I buggered up these auditions, I would have been mid-40s by this time. And immediately I thought of that incident with Tony. And I thought, no, this is going to be me. That's what's going to happen to me. I'm getting out of this. The agent I had was pretty run of the mill, and I just thought, no. And then I got asked, oh, could you go to Manchester for an audition? I said, well, are they paying? I live in the south of England.
Mm-hmm.
Manchester by car is like a 6-hour car drive.
Right.
By
exactly.
train, it's probably not any different by train. I live down on the south coast by the English Channel. And I said, well, are they paying expenses? No, they're not. They're not paying expenses. And I just thought, oh, I'm 45 years of fucking age. What am I doing to myself?
Yeah.
So that was it. Stopped paying my equity card dues, all the rest of it, and just thought, I'm going to go off and do something else. My business had finished by that time. And it really was a question of starting again. And I went back to school. I didn't get an education. I went back to school and did a couple of O levels and an A level, and then I stumbled across this mediation service, and I thought, I could maybe train to be a mediator and see how that goes. And they paid for everything, and but I had to do lots and lots of voluntary work for them. But during this period, I had a lucky series of events, and I did some lecturing for them, and somebody in the group or in the audience came up to me and gave me a card, like what you're doing. I run a company where we employ lecturers, etc. Give me a call. So I did, and then I retrained as a trainer, lecturer. Then spent, whilst doing that, having to pass exams and take NVQs, and I'm now qualified beyond belief. I don't have a university degree, but I'm pretty well qualified, and so I carried on like that for 10 years. I mean, I even worked for Sussex Police at one time.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
As a civilian investigator.
You didn't ever have a werewolf breaking out of a movie theater while you were the cops, was you?
No. And I tried to play down the, that part of my life.
Gotcha.
When I was working for the police.
Yeah.
Then after that I worked for the NHS here, mm-hmm. in the psychology department. I worked with psychiatrists and psychologists. And then I bumped into Derek Lyons after several years. And he said, "Hey, good convention scene." Well, what's that? What's the convention scene? Told me all about it. So I'll see if I can get you one. Then he said, you've got to start publishing yourself, that you did all this work. And that's when I discovered that, excuse me, bit of acid, that the rumor had gone round that I'd died. Several had died. And it's like, well, whatever happened to Alan Austen? Well, he must have died. Well, I think he died. Oh, I heard that he died. It's like Chinese whispers and the rumor mill, And I've had people say to me, I'd heard you died. So, but that's where that brings us up to speed, really. Where I am now with.
So let's pause that for a second there, because, and this is to bring. I mean that's a hard story to hear, and especially coming to that point where people are saying they think you're dead, right? Yeah. But you said, you realize you'd never be the lead, but you were wrong, because you made your triumphant return. Two of my favorite independent filmmakers right now, Emma Dark and M.W. Daniels, Martin Daniels. So let's talk about that. First of all, Salient -10. Boom.
Well, yeah, and that kind of you know, I've got to say, my life has been a series of weird and strange and wonderful events. I call it serendipity. There's that word serendipity, which means a happy accident. And I've had a lot of ups and downs in my life, and the ups have been right up there, mountaintop, and the downs have been, you're down in the swamp, mate. You know, it's they've been, you know,
You and
it's
me
been,
both, Alan. You and me both.
well, we learn, don't we?
Yep.
We learn.
Yep.
But yeah, I'm at this a convention, and for 2 days, and I met Emma there. You know, I was signing for Flash Gordon, strangely enough, and she was there as a horror film maker and writer, etc. And we weren't sat very far from each other, and we got into conversations and what have you, and we got on well. And she said to me, "Would you ever return to acting?" I said, "No, I'm done with all of that now," you know. And as we were saying goodbye, I said, "Well, look, Emma," I said, "if you ever did come up with something, you know, that you think I might be interested in, or whatever, you know, just you know, give me a shout, and we'll talk about it." So strangely enough, 2-3 months later, she did, out of the blue. And she said, "Well, you know, I've shot this film Salient -10, and it's not worked out with the lead actor, although I've heard he's a very, very, very good actor. Perhaps it just wasn't working for him." And so she said, "I'm going to reshoot it. But, you know, would you be interested?" It's the lead. So I said, "Yeah." She said, "Well, after my experience, I'm going to have to ask you to audition for it." So it's one of those things where if you say no, you'll probably regret it. If you say yes, you might still regret it, but probably not as much as if you'd said no. I don't know. I mean, you know, so my opinion was, I said, "Yeah, I'll come along to audition." And I thought, if I go along there and I don't get this job, then that's it. That is the sealed lid on my acting career. Forget about it. Finito. Good night, Vienna. So I went along, and she called me up within a day or two to say, yeah, can you do the film?
Right.
So again, if I say no to this, I'm going to regret it. So I'll say yes, and we'll just see how it goes. And yeah, best thing I've done in later years, really. Couldn't possibly regret it. It's a cracking film.
It is.
You know, I had a great time on it. Emma's a brilliant director, and we were lucky enough to get Philip Bloom to be the cinematographer. Well, that wasn't anything to do with me, but that was all Emma. And he's, you know, one of the leading cinematographers in the UK, if not the world. And as it turned out, I knew Philip's mum in the old days. Yeah, his mum. We wouldn't say we were good friends, but we knew each other back in the olden days, you know. And so yeah, I mean, that's where we are now. I did, you know, Martin has got on board. Emma and I are hoping to do something at some point in the future, but COVID-19 has
kind of
plays onto that, yeah. But just at the outbreak of COVID last year, luckily I managed to do a film with Martin, and
that's The Other Soul of Evie, right?
The Other Soul to Evie, yeah.
Before we get to that, before we go to that, can I give you my perspective on why I love Salient -10 and specifically your performance in it?
Please do.
Yeah, you know, I grew up, I think there's a very British sensibility to certain sci-fi things that just isn't replicated in Hollywood. Hollywood is very A to B to C to D, and here's the resolution. Do you ever remember a show, Sapphire and Steel, with David David McCallum and Joanna Lumley.
Yeah, I do remember it very well.
Love it. To this day. They just dropped them in there was never, look, they dropped in here. This is what's going on. Go with it. There's no easy solutions. There's no resolution. And when I watched Salient -10 and watched you, I'm not going to give away spoilers to the audience because I want them to go watch this film because it's cracking. I really felt like it was like the heir apparent of like that Sapphire and Steel sort of sensibility. You got to go with it. There's no easy answers, and wow, man, you were cracking in that. I loved it. I really did.
Thank you very much. But it was, literally, just dropped into this situation and deal with it. And well, Philip gave me a very nice compliment, actually, Philip Bloom. I mean, we were getting takes done in 1 or 2 takes, which I wasn't, expecting. And, and I was thinking, what's going on here? How come we're getting this done so quickly, so snappily? Except, of course, on the occasional take where I struggled with a line or so, and that was obviously down to me. That wasn't anything to do with Emma or Philip. It's just me, just struggling with lines. But when we watched, because I won't watch rushes. I don't like watching myself on screen, and I won't watch rushes. But Philip said, "Well, I think you should." And I thought, "Well, okay, I'll take a look." And I was just blown away. Not so much with me, because I always pick fault in everything that I do, but the actual cinematography was incredible. So that made me watch the rushes, and Philip said to me, he said, we got them done so quickly, the takes done so quickly. He said, because you know your job, you know what to do. You've worked in front of the camera for decades, and to you it's just like falling off a log. It must be. And I said, well, I suppose it is really, because I was nervous starting work on that. I hadn't been in front of a camera for how many years? At least 12 years.
Right.
Bit more than that, probably. And you do get that self-doubt, and you do think, can I still do this? Can I? But it was just like, it was, that break was nothing at all. I mean, it was just like, I think it's like learning to swim or riding a bicycle, Once you've learned,
right?
It's a muscle. Yeah. So I found it, and particularly so that it was a small unit, a small production, and I got on very well with Philip and Emma and everybody else that was involved, and that made it comfortable. That made it really, I mean, if it had been a big movie set with all the hierarchy that goes on with that, maybe it would have been different. I don't know, but certainly cast and crew made me feel extremely comfortable and welcome, and gave me the confidence to just step back into it.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved it. I absolutely loved it.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So then you come out of that, and so you come out of working with Emma Dirk. That's incredible. Now you come on and you meet Martin Daniels, who to me, again, another fantastic talent out there. I love House of Lexi, which has also got another Emma connection there as well. Emma's a star in that. So talk to me about the other soul of Evie.
Well, the other soul of Evie is a film about a brother and sister, and it's a film about mental health. I play their father, and they are both quite estranged to me, and I'm a man that's trying to rekindle his relationship with his children. And and also going through shock that his son has had this accident which has rendered him with brain damage. And my character then wants to take over, you know, as the head of the household. I'll have to look at, you know, I'll look after him, etc., etc.
Gotcha.
Whereas Evie, you know, is a very strong-willed character that actually doesn't want dad back in, and she's going to take after her brother, take care of her brother, etc., etc. So I'd say it's a film about, you know, family relationships and of course mental health.
Yeah.
And Charlie Suff, who plays my son, or I should say I play Charlie's father. I mean, that's what I should emphasize with both Charlie and Charlotte, is that they are the leads in this, and it's their film, and I simply play their dad. And that's and Charlie is just excellent as a young actor playing a man with brain damage. And I said to Charlie while we're on set, I said, look, I've got to tell you this, Charlie. I think your performance is amazing, and I'll tell you the reason why I think it's so amazing. Is that when I was, as we talked in part one, I was a young boxer.
Yep.
At Gordon's gym. And there were lots of minor celebrities that used that place, and famous sportsmen. And one of them was a chap whose name escapes me now, who had been a champion, again talking about motorbikes, been a champion motorcycle racer, TTs, all that sort of thing. You know, I think he won the Isle of Man TT at one point. I can't remember now. But in a race, he came off his bike and his brain spun around in his head. And I said to Charlie, I said, how you're acting is exactly how this man presented himself with the speech. I said, it could be, I said, it's taken me back decades. It's almost as though I'm talking to that chap again, all these years later. I said, that's how good Charlie Suss's performance is in this film, and what a great young actor he is. And Charlotte as well. They are both brilliant. And so I'm quite proud to have played their dad. Also, for me, it was the first time I'd ever played the father to adult children.
Wow.
You know, so that was the first.
Amazing, amazing. So I guess final question: what's on the horizon? Where will we see you next?
Well, I have got a couple of things. Well, I've got one hopefully definite thing on the horizon. But that's so far away at the moment that I wouldn't really like to speak about it without permission from the filmmakers.
Understood. Perfectly understood. Yeah.
Emma and I have still got a project that we'd like to pull together, but you know, say COVID has really pushed that back a long way. So at some point in the future, hopefully we'll do that. And it's a really, I mean, both these projects are extremely good. But I also did, as a bit of a, just a bit of acting exercise, actually. I did a film called Flowers for the Dead for a couple of new filmmakers here. It was about 6 months ago when we had a brief break in lockdown.
Yep.
Last September, very brief, and you know, perhaps the wrong decision to have a lockdown, you know, an ease up at that time, but we were allowed to do it. And that's quite a nice little film. It's like a comedy drama. That's on YouTube at the moment, so you might want to check that out.
Yes.
We ad-libbed the dialogue, which for me makes it a lot easier rather than learning lines. But we ad-libbed the dialogue, and yeah, it's a nice little film. It's had some good feedback, but yeah.
Excellent.
So yeah, for the future, you know, it's one of those things, isn't it? When are we going to come out of, you know, we're easing lockdown here now, gradually, week by week. We should be back, well, the government has said, back to normal by June the 21st. But, you know, it's going to be a new normal.
Yeah,
will be a
absolutely.
new normal.
Uh,
And I've had my first jab, and I'm due the second one in June, so I'm feeling a lot safer.
Good for you, man.
So we'll just see how it goes. I mean, yeah, it's kind of disappointed me for so many reasons, and I feel like I have been a bit hamstrung by COVID and lockdown. But then I'm just being philosophical about it. I thought, well, I never expected to be making a comeback. So,
But you did.
yeah. So to me, I'm just content with the small comeback that I've made so far. If it increases into something else in the future, then that's a bonus. If not, then that's fine too. Because I've lived a life and I've had a great life, and I'm not hungry for it anymore, and that's the nice thing. It's why I'm kind of so reluctant. When we come out, things get back to normal. Do I want to go out there and find myself an agent? Do I want to be, getting the train up to London and doing castings and doing auditions and rejections and sometimes success? And, do I want to do that again to myself?
Right.
Not really. Not really.
You,
I'm really, I don't like agents. I can negotiate a contract myself. I'm not a dummy.
Yep.
I don't need someone to do that for me. I can do it.
Gotcha.
I've been around the block so many times. I know the business more or less inside out. It's changed a lot, but the fundamentals, the rudimentals are still there. My life's fine. I've missed the conventions for the past year and a bit, but I've got a couple of those lined up already.
Perfect.
Hopefully that one that I had lined up for LA was cancelled in December, but hopefully it'll go ahead this December. We'll see. But my life's, I've got a really nice Star Wars fan base who make me happy. I'm not hungry. I accepted I was never going to be a star many years ago, and I'm not hungry to be out there acting it. I enjoy it. I enjoy acting. In fact, I love it.
Yep.
But I won't play people's games.
Gotcha. Whatever
anymore.
will be, right?
Exactly.
But you keep me posted, man.
Exactly.
I want to hear what's like, keep me up to speed on what's going on, right?
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Alan, I got to say a couple of things. First of all, absolutely fascinating. I've really, honestly, I have been thorough, and I could tell you the feedback I've got from people, like they're dying to hear the second part of this. So most of all, thank you for graciously splitting this into 2 interviews. Because like I said in my promos, man, some lives are too big for one interview, right? And yours is definitely, it's a big one. And last but not least, next time I'm in London, one London boy to another, there's a pint with your name on it, my friend, okay?
That's what I like to hear. We'll
Good
definitely
stuff.
do that. Yeah, we'll definitely do that. We'll meet up. Like I say, I live down on the south coast, but I do try to get up to London as often when I can. But yeah, we'll do that. Definitely. Look forward to it.
Alan Austen, good night, God bless, and thank you for your time, sir. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Been a pleasure.